Welcome to Resume the Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Page, and I'm here to spread the message that you can, in fact, be happy in your career. I'm a former executive recruiter turned career coach, and I am obsessed with learning about why people have chosen their career, what led them to that decision, and how they achieved happiness in the process. So, come join the ongoing conversation that exposes you to career paths of all origins with one thing in common: happiness. So, press play and let's resume the conversation with this week's episode. All right, today our guest is Richard Blank. Richard's journey in the call center space is filled with 1,000 twists and turns. When he was 27 years old, he relocated to Costa Rica, and he trained over 5,000 employees for one of the larger call centers in San Jose. So with a mix of motivational speaking style, which you'll definitely get from this podcast, believe me, backed by tactful and appropriate rhetoric, Richard has shared his knowledge and trained over 10,000 bilingual telemarketers. He is the Chief Executive Officer for Costa Rica's call center since 2008, and he's really been an entrepreneur for, I think, like over 2 decades or so. Is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Courtney, so happy to be here with you and your amazing audience. And we're just going to resume our life and make ways to increase our happiness and fulfillment.
Yes.
And so I'm here to share some secrets today with you and your audience.
Awesome. Yes. So Richard reached out to me and I had a very short call with him, and about 2 seconds in, I was like, oh, this guy is great. Like, you're so charismatic and you just embody like happiness at work. Which is really like my whole purpose in this podcast is just to show people that you can be happy at work, because a lot of people spend their days in a job for whatever reason, all good reasons, that, a job that they're not super excited about, or they're complacent and just going through the motions. So I love talking to people who are actually like really excited to get to work and talk about it. But I want to start off. So I like to start off with this question for everybody. If you were at a dinner party, and I feel like you go to a lot of dinner parties. I don't know why. I just get that kind of energy from you.
I do receive a lot of invitations.
If someone came up to you and asked, what do you do? What would you say?
I write children's books, but currently I'm a CEO of a call center.
Okay, cool. We're going to come back to that. Okay, cool. And what did you want to be as a kid? Because I will say the owner's CEO, president of a call center isn't necessarily something a 5-year-old might say. So what did you want to be when you were a kid?
I guess I was always gravitating towards groups of people where when you always have your best friends that are around you. And just like in Greece, you always think you're always going to be together right at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wanted to surround myself with a strong team of people that have mutual respect and love, and we can have all these experiences together and grow together. And that's why I have deep fidelity to my high school friends, my alma mater. But besides that, those that have crossed my path along my spiritual journey, it's when water seeks its own level, where it's almost like you've met each other in 12 lives prior to this one. It's obvious you can pick up where you left off. And sometimes silence is the best form of communication. It means that you're inherently very comfortable with that individual. And
Absolutely.
so you can be selective if you want to. But for me, growing up as a child, I guess I like the A team, so I wanted to be part of those guys. Maybe the face man. I don't know.
Nice.
But that's me growing up in the 70s and 80s. But to have this luxury trade where the stars were aligned, my 1,000,000-to-1 odds hit, where besides you got to get past certain guilt, and you also have to stay the course when there's very large influences and leverage that are put against you. And so these were calculated risks, and sometimes it was serendipity where I just fell into it. And so if you can make life that sort of soup of experiences and just take out the stuff you don't like, then you might have something there.
Yeah. I want to touch on something you said about guilt and maybe like expectations that might have been surrounding you or placed on you as a teenager or young adult. Can you speak to that a little bit, if that was something that you dealt with and how it affected your path?
Of course, Courtney. It's a sensitive topic. I believe that even though mine is specific, it is relatable to those that have parents that expect you to enter into medicine, to law, family, business, marry a certain person, have certain friends, live a certain life. And that's fine if you want that structure. And if you like camp and school and your hours that are put out for you, that's fine. But life gives you zigs and zags. And sometimes if you're book smart, it doesn't mean you can survive in the real world. People always laugh at that at high school reunions. The ones you expected the most disappointed you and the long shots hit. It's because they found their way in this world. And so for me going back, I come from a nice family and we were immigrants from Europe at the turn of the 20th. So my great grandparents went to New York and the garment industry, learned English and made their money during the Depression, which is a great story. And so when it was my turn to choose my path, I didn't want to go to Harvard Law like Grandpa, Columbia Business like Pops, and Washington and Lee like my older brother. I didn't have the structure, discipline, maturity, or the grade. Like Courtney, I had the love for Spanish. And it was my favorite class, and my teacher wrote me a recommendation for college. And so I knew that this gift of a second language would show such good faith to people as a first impression. So I realized none of my friends could do it. So I could volunteer for that mission and be the one to translate for a doctor and get us out of the cave. And so I saw myself as being marketable. So I used to put "Se habla español" on my business cards. And lo and behold, it landed me an internship for Telemundo. I got a job for the importers of Corona postgrad. And when I was 27, a very good friend of mine in college offered me a 1 in a million shot. The barn door open theory. And I had a chance to
What is that?
Well, when a barn door is open, that horse isn't coming back. And so
unless it's a really good horse.
Well, Courtney, if you allow the bird to leave and it comes back, then it's not trained. It loves you and it feels comfortable. And so for me, I realized that I wanted to test water. And by moving to Costa Rica for just a couple months, I realized this is where I wanted to be. It's the first time I saw the insides of a call center, but I fell in love here. I married the girl of my dreams and I learned the business. And a friend of mine extended to me 4 years of almost graduate school of really learning, not C-level, Courtney, but from the inside, Al. And so it really wasn't a calculated risk. It was a dedicated practice. Come on, buddy, it's your time risk. I just needed some capital and impulse control, and I was able to start a business. But you have to see the sign. If there's positive reinforcement, you mentioned earlier getting excited to go to work in a day, and no one really wants to go to work. That's why I read in the 70s show said, listen, Eric, it's work. If you have a luxury trade, if you see the art in something, do you remember the Karate Kid? Do you remember when Danielson had to do wax on, wax off and up and down to do the fencing?
Of course.
He hated it. But now when he looks back at it, besides the training that he did, Miyagi wanted him to master levels. My good friend Courtney, if you're not humble enough to clean a table, to do a fence, to wash a car, to make a bed, then how could you expect to get to the next level and your peers respecting you? And so I think Miyagi was trying to ground Daniel-san in these exercises by, it's not just the repetition, it's after you snap out of that stupid honeymoon stage, resentment stage, bargaining stage, so stages of loss, you can then come into acceptance and you realize your abilities and the areas in which you're struggling. And that's part of maturity. And so, Courtney, amongst my journey, it wasn't about getting knocked down. It's like the gym. It was about learning to adjust my strength. And that's what I did do. And as much as there was naysayers and gray believers, it's only the people that want to put seatbelts on you, but it doesn't mean that the car doesn't move. And so I always had to do this sort of reinforcement by proving my point, not just on the motivation and the passion. I'm proving to you that my language skills were getting better. I'm getting hired at certain areas. Just because you don't have the experience in it doesn't mean that I can't do this. And why would you ever take a spark out of someone that has passion for something? I think it's one of the most beautiful things that people can find out about themselves. And so I guess to answer your question in a supreme pizza sort of way, I had to make a lot of selfish decisions, my friend, in order to stay my course and know that my balance and my heart was doing the correct thing.
Yeah. I think something that is really poignant about that is just that you followed what excited you. And it was really, that was the direction. And it was that simple, really, for to know what the next step was. So one thing that I want to go back to was Spanish. And what was so exciting about Spanish? What drew you to the language of all the languages? What grabbed you?
Well, here's the thing. When I was growing up, we took vacations to Mexico. So besides enjoying myself in the sun, I came back with vocabulary. And it
Okay.
wasn't a parlor trick. Anytime I met somebody that was bilingual and I used my limited grammar and vocabulary, they were so excited. And so I saw this was neat and it was cool. 3 languages were offered at Abington High School with Spanish, German, and French. I took Spanish because of the Puerto Rican and Cuban population. I was in Philadelphia. Plus,
Okay.
all the world was stage. I had a chance to be able to use this outside of the office. But here's the thing. A lot of words, since I studied Latin, you could almost dissect the word. And also the word hotel is the same as Spanish. So I started out with one word. Here we go. It's almost like the Brady Bunch when they put the nickel in the piggy bank. And so you got to start saving somewhere. So I started with the easy words and I realized I could do this. I just needed the bridge of grammar. And so it's really about sitting down and studying intermediate grammar for 6 months. And then the rest is vocab. But then I chose intercambios to sit and speak with people over coffee, which was cool, very Renaissance of me. But then I loved movies. So I would watch movies in Spanish with Spanish subtitles. Why? Because I needed the phonetic ear. There's a ton of cars and music and screaming and dogs. I'm not going to get this. And I can't read lips. So I almost have to give myself the practice of 50% Spanish when I'm at a party. Can I dissect the phonetics behind it? It enabled me to see the culture, the art, the genre, the expression. And so when I was entering into this adventure of mine in Central America, I had such momentum. I was almost starting on third base. I knew I'm a guest in their country. I understand their culture. I'm open-minded. And that just makes for an incredible experience.
Yeah. And what was it about Costa Rica specifically? Yeah, I know that you were given this opportunity to do a project and to work there for a bit, but you ended up getting married to, your wife is Costa Rican, and staying and creating a life in Costa Rica. What was it about the culture of Costa Rica that you there?
Well, I'm going to share a secret with you because I know my parents are watching, but I don't care. I'm going to tell you a secret. Anyway. In my late 20s, I wanted to shed some skins. No, it's true. I wanted my adventure because sometimes you can get locked into a career or routine and you wonder where's the adventure of life when we were reading about these stories as a child. And so I guess I was doing the best I could to leave a castle and slay a dragon. I found a princess and became a prince. And so I just didn't want this whirlwind of experience and stimulation to end. Now, there's luxuries in the United States and there's adjustments I had to make here, but that's all part of the plan. If you have depth and you have essence, you can adjust anywhere, Courtney. And so I didn't want to have the certain leverage and advantages back home. I wanted to see if I started out on a level playing field, could I make something? But don't kid yourself. I needed IT support to build this company. I needed supervisors, HR, lawyers, and accountants. It's more like I'm the trunk of the Richard tree. And then you have branches and roots. And by delegating and bringing people up and finding the right people to walk with me to create that sort of synergy, then you can create a certain environment that's unique from the rest, where I can shatter misconception.
Yeah. And you were hitting on something really interesting that I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs who start out by themselves, and that makes sense. And then as their business grows a little bit, it can be difficult to know when to spend money and where. And you're talking about delegating. So I'm curious to know, like, when in this journey of yours, starting the call center and becoming president and CEO of it, who were the first people that you reached out to? You mentioned IT. That was obviously a big one because it's call center. But after that, where were you in need of help the most and noticeably weak in your own, in the framework of the business?
Well, it's actually quite simple. Well, naturally, I needed the specialist like the IT attorney. But internally, I almost saw it, Courtney, like a squire or a page to a knight. So I'm working with somebody, right? Billy's 20 years old, weapon behind the ears, but he's showing up on time and he's bright and he's coachable. And when I make suggestions in regards to the thesaurus to expand his similes and give a more diplomatic vocabulary, the kid takes it serious. And so why can't I have him sit in on a powwow meeting when we're writing scripts? Why
Mhm.
can't I teach him how to write a business composition email so he knows that sort of structure, or how to do a certain tailor-made voicemail for a client and explain how this is going to be effective? And so I can see the budding, I can see the growth in the interest.
Mhm.
And it's not just someone giving me attention, it's actual interest. And so children should be heard, not just seen. And this younger generation, maybe they're used to things that are nonverbal through chat or through emails. And if I can develop their interpersonal face-to-face skills by asking me questions in a certain way and taking copious notes, doing follow-up questions, maybe they become more self-confident.
Hmm.
And so I'm not going to change the wheel. Maybe you and I, my friend, are old school specialists, but if I can teach someone proper manners and to have face-to-face conversations, there's an excellent chance that they're going to beat out the competition when it comes down to final interviews or decisions. And so I'm just teaching them what was shown me by my grandparents, plus a little bit of Face Man and Remington Steel. But besides that, I want to see if I can balance their bikes, Courtney, because it's an art of speech. They're not just regurgitating or robots. I need for them to be so attentive and in the moment so they can anchor and bond with the clients and give them very positive experiences and
Mhm.
retain them and upsell and really find fulfillment in their job. So that's what we do.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious to know about the nitty gritty of how you find people for for your call centers and how you do your trainings. Because, well, okay, I have like 1,000 questions. So, one,
Sure.
have you found that with young, and obviously, like, I'm a millennial, right? So when I was coming up, I remember there was a lot of, I don't want to call it like hate talk, but there was a lot of, oh, millennials are lazy. And now it's funny because Gen Z is coming up and I'm hearing a lot of similarities from what I remember hearing when I got out of college from older generations saying the same thing about Gen Zs. And my husband is always talking about Gen Zs at work. And just, it's hilarious because he
Sure.
sounds like an old man. But I'm curious to know if you have found that with every generation that has come up, there's like a trademark that they have trouble with. And with Gen Z in particular, the now up and coming generation, because of technology and because of messaging and all of that, have you found that they are less impressive in person and with speaking, not necessarily in person, but on the phone, and their speaking abilities and communicative styles and prowess?
For the most part, I think if they want to, they can.
Mhm.
But what I've seen the lack of would be certain commitment in regards to professional. Since I compete against Amazon, somebody could be hired to. So in essence, they have the leverage. Doesn't mean I want to yell and scream and threaten people, but I've seen people not give 2 weeks notices, or they just do the maximum of minimum to get fired and use labor
Oh,
laws.
wow.
Well, when you run a business, that's sometimes what's in the kitchen. But I also do follow labor laws. So we try to do things where people are following through. But I tell you what, highly intelligent, someone that is bilingual, Courtney, bears the mark of hired. Naturally, they come to my door with 1, 5, 10, 15 experience. Multiple call centers, HP, Intel, customer support, sales, you name it. They mastered the CRM's headsets and typing tests.
Mhm.
And that's fine. But why don't you turn the paper over? Give me 2 paragraphs of a coming of age moment. I'll gauge your English. Come on. Show me a time you beat up a bully or saved a kitten. Or as you say, take that 1 in a million chance because you want to drink life a little, want to marry the person of your dreams, or walk across that dance floor and ask somebody to dance. And if I see that, it shows me multiple things. A, that you're not just a print. You can be a B, if an incredible person like Courtney does have you down and wants to bond with you and ask you questions, are you capable of bonding? And third, can I give you a super cool nickname? So if it's a rainy Wednesday and you're feeling bad, I'm going to call you Kitten Saver Champ. That's where you need to be. And those are the sort of things, if you're willing to disclose and make yourself vulnerable, then collectively we can make ourselves more powerful. And there's nothing wrong with show and tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. There's a big vulnerability and just the openness to be, what's the word? Just honest, really, about where you're coming from and what you are there for, I think is a huge marker also of just emotional intelligence. And that is really valuable in any business. And I'm curious to know, so when you're training people, so once they get through the Richard test, when you're training people, let's say someone who is new, brand new, and they're there just because they need a job and call center is all remote. I don't know if they come in, do they come in person still, or do you have remote workers? But what is it like? What is the first kind of like training that you do with people? Because speaking is such it's such an art that I'm just so curious to know how you would train someone to create a bond over the phone in such a short amount of time.
Of course. Pre-COVID, it used to be brick and mortar. Post-COVID, as you see, hybrid work from home. Thankfully, with our equipment and technology, we can connect with people through VPNs and work with us. It just took away a lot of the excitement we had on site. How do we train people? You mentioned someone that walks in with zero phone experience. I can teach you to use the system. You have no bad habits, perfect clean slate. I can take you. And then we're talking about people that are plug and play that have the experience. What do you and I do? It's almost like you and I are going to remodel the house. It's a beautiful house, but sometimes we don't like the paint, right? Or the backyard, we got to put the pool in the sport court. They just didn't do it right. And so I see where they rushed training, didn't give them the resources, or I hate to say it, maybe gave them bad habits. And so I'm never going to teach them to lie. I'm going to teach them to educate. And from that point of view, people make decisions. It's a great way to move things forward. And so I'll gauge vocabulary. If they're using words like help or excuse me, I will replace them with, instead of help, guide, assist, lend a hand. Excuse me, Courtney, for my clarification. These little adjustments are adjustments of tone and what it is buying us 30 seconds of time. And it's also allowing us to show you we're paying attention so you don't have to repeat it a second time. Got your point. And so certain transitional sentences that we use, I know how to rate questions, take it from horizontal to vertical, open-ended questions. Perfect example. Do you like ice cream? Or, Courtney, what kind of ice cream do you like? What kind of ice cream do you like, Courtney?
It's funny. I just went to get ice cream today. I got mint chocolate.
How many scoops do you do?
I get a small, which is really massive.
Do you do cup or cone?
I'm gluten-free, so I'm reluctantly gluten-free, so I have to do cup.
Final question. Any toppings?
Up north, I'm not going to say what they're called up north in Boston, which is where I was this past weekend. But
right?
yes, they're called Jimmy's, which is not okay. It's not okay. I can't believe they still use that, but sprinkles, well, chocolate sprinkles, yeah.
Yeah, chocolate Jimmy's. Oh, rock on. See, we just bonded and anchored. So imagine if I'm like, do you like toppings? Yes. Do you like?
Right.
Yeah. You gave me the double. You gave me the ones. So I love open-ended questions. It's funny because I did call Jimmy's, and chocolate Jimmy's are my favorite too. And so as much, but that's cool. And that's a Richard call. So unlike everybody else where we then got to talk business, at least there was a second where you're anchoring, where you can do a company name spike. Zoom podcast, how are you today? Compared to, may I speak with Courtney, that you sound like a salesperson. You can mystery shop. You can say it better than the person answering. And if I do get transferred to you by your assistant, Billy, I'm going to let you know Billy was great. And I'm going to do it verbally and in writing. So when I call your company back and your assistant answers, they're going to thank me, give me more company culture and add to my momentum. And so is it manipulation? No, it's just being courteous.
Yeah.
And really doing the due diligence of your podcast, of your company, of who you are. So in case I have to leave a voicemail, in case I'm doing an email, or in case I get so excited to get you on the phone, I cannot wait to discuss what you have done. Now, does that separate me from others? All day. Will someone beat me on price and contractual terms? Yes, of course. But guess what? At least Courtney and I are going 15 rounds and we're going the distance. At least we went A to Z in 1 to 3. And then at the end of our journey, they make a decision. But my friend, instead of making 100 calls a day, you and I would probably be at 44. Why? Because our talk time is all over the place. We're just talking to people, getting referrals. And so our metrics would be everywhere. It wouldn't be the average.
Yeah.
Because we're artists.
And it's more enjoyable for the people making the call. You're not like you said earlier, you're just not a robot. You're making connection, like actual connection which is the one huge complaint people have when they are connected to a call center, right? That it's someone who doesn't listen, active listening, and it's someone who has no idea what they're doing. And it's basically, you might as well be talking to an automated service. And it's so much better, just from my own experience, it's so much better when you're talking to someone and you're like, you get off the phone and you're like, oh, that was nice, really nice. So I want to ask you really quickly about the bilingual aspect of it. So it's a bilingual call center. What
Correct.
does that mean? Does that mean that they will immediately grasp whether or not a person speaks English or Spanish, or they give the option?
Good question. In order for me to hire them, they need an 85% proficiency. And it's
Okay.
all from accent. I'd rather have a stronger accent with perfect grammar and vocabulary, right? And so
Yes.
I have to make sure they can be understood and understand people. But it's really a grasp of vocabulary. Sometimes we need people to have to give us a certain log,
Mhm.
what to do. Role playing is essential in case there are certain areas of the United States that we're connecting. But learning a second language is 10 times harder than anything I'll put them on. And they consider Costa Rican to have the most neutral of English accents.
Oh, really?
They claim that. It's almost like someone from Iowa. They have no accent, like my old roommate from college.
Mhm.
But I tell you what, you were mentioning earlier, and I'm going to share a secret with you. I love sharing secrets with you and your
I
audience.
know you're full of them.
The romantic death. It's like the full card. If you've ever had your tarot cards read, it's someone that's sniffing a rose with the sun on their back, about to walk off a cliff. If you can make 30 seconds an incredible company name spike, name drop, proper introduction, a little bit of excitement, and they hang up on you. And if you can do that 100 times a day, you're jumping cloud. It's not the deep breath sigh. It's not the, my God, I need a smoke. These are romantic deaths. You might need to snap Kathy out of something because she just got off a black and blue phone call. Or as you mentioned, people don't have passion on the call. They're just grinding it out. And so that's why the first impression that I make, Courtney, every time is the company name spike. I will literally say the name of your company better than you do and ask how the company is doing. You don't know who I am. I still have this anonymity, and you better get your ship shape, because if this is your first impression of a company, they should be smiling. And so I almost need to remind them to straighten their tie. And so at least what it does is it buys me 10 seconds. Just snap them out of it for them to ask me my name. And then I use a buffer boomerang technique.
Yeah, what is that?
I buffer negative tones. What is your name? And I'll go, Courtney. So I will buffer it and name drop you. Let you know that's an excellent question. My name is Richard Blank. You buffer with the name drop. It's a great question. Glad you brought it up. Repeat the question for active listening and throw that boomerang back with happy smiles and sunshine, puppies and roses. Because once again, why are you bitter? And so
Right. Yeah.
these are wiping your feet, asking permission, manners, my friend.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly readjusting tones and paces and politeness. And sometimes it's no matter what you do, they're going to say, we're good, thanks. Nice word, good, thanks. We all read Machiavelli's The Prince. A king that never listens to anyone doesn't last very long. King listens to everyone, can pick and choose.
Good call.
And so for people, and I'm not saying you and I are selling vacuum cleaners, no offense, but I'm just saying the fact of the matter is if you're not willing to at least listen to a knight that comes to your gate, then don't be surprised if you don't make other alliances. And so I've had people say, well, Richard, you're the best salesman I've ever heard. Thanks, Courtney. Well, I'm really not a salesman because I don't want to force your hand, but the fact that I lasted 10 minutes, answered all your questions, and you seem to like me, obviously I've broken that misconception of what a boiler room and Hollywood has told you about telemarketer. And so I'm glad they glamorized it because it is a beautiful art of speech, but just like fire, you can use it for warmth, light, and health, but you can also use it to burn people.
Oh,
and you
yeah.
have to be very careful when you have these sort of skills, these linguistic skills, because I think the worst thing to do is to face somebody in public. That's a terrible thing to do. You should always praise in public and you should critique in private. And so these are the soft skills that I've learned being a CEO to do this for preventative measures so people don't quit. I can save somebody on a day when something outside the office might be affecting their.
Sure. Yeah. And so many things. One, I was just talking to somebody the other day, someone I grew up with, and they were telling me about their current job situation. They're just not a fan of their boss, right? And it's a great, amazing compensation. Everything you could want on paper, but not a great boss. And it's a make or break. And that conversation that you're speaking of, when somebody is having something going on, maybe it's personal, whatever, having a great boss that is able to tune into that and treat you like a human and just connect. It's so underrated. And I think a lot of what you're talking about today is just ego and leaving the ego at the door, really. And even just from the beginning of our conversation, when you're talking about basically rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty in order to get to where you are today is huge. Nobody's going to roll out of bed and be a CEO. There are things that you can't skip the steps, right? And I think that takes a lot of grit and also recognition that you're not always going to be as special as you think to everybody, but that's okay. You don't have to be the king or whatever to everybody, so long as you're doing your best and leaving the ego at the door. I think that's so much of what you're saying. And when you have a boss that does that, it is so, so valuable. So I just want to say that.
Yeah, Courtney, and I think that was awesome. Think
Oh,
about it
thank-
like this. You could either pay it forward or pay yourself. And I'm not talking
Mm.
financially. I have a luxury trade. English is their second language. You and I are native speakers. So come on, we're Billy Madison right now when we're playing
Yeah.
dodgeball. And so for me, with this delicacy, I'm able to do wax on, wax off. I'm able to adjust grammar and vocabulary and tell you what cheese fries are and what the shore means compared to the beach.
Yeah.
You call it the shore like we do. And so those are the little things, but also being humble. Remember, if no one shows up at Chuck E. Cheese, you have no friends at your birthday party. And so it's not fun playing big boss. I'd rather have it on merit, where I have people standing with me, not behind me. Like George Orwell's 1984. If that's what you want, then go for it. It's golden jewels lose its luster. And there are certain people that want to know value. They're outside of something that anybody can possess from many different ways. And if you are into the spirituality like I am, not in deep form meditation or things that I can't explain metaphysically, but the fact that I've been blessed with such a beautiful, it only slows me down even more. As Ferris Bueller wisely said, to look around once in a while, you may miss it. And so instead of, as they say, when you get older, time speeds up. No, my good friend. When you start putting those of the puzzle to your big board, put things to bed, you forgive yourself for when you were younger and you just didn't know better. And you realize that you have friends that have been with you for your whole life because they love you. I think you're probably the richest person in.
It's so crazy that you're talking about friends that you grew up with. I just spent my weekend this past weekend. I have 2 little kids, so leaving them is like a big deal. My daughter is 3 and my son is 1. So leaving them is a big deal. And one of my best friends that I grew up with, we've known each other since 3rd grade. So we were 8 when we met. She's like my sister, and there's 5 of us. And
you got to give her a shout out. What is your best friend's name?
Tracy McLaughlin, but really she's married now. So Tracy Hasgard, and she's expecting her first baby. And I was like, and her mom, who was my second mom, I lived at her house. She passed away last year, and it was really upsetting and sad. But it was Tracy's baby shower this weekend. And I was like, there is no way in hell I can miss that. Like that, it's family. At that point, when you've grown up together and you have that many decades behind you, I think it speaks volumes about yourself and the ability to keep relationships and how you value relationships. So I think it's something, another really good friend of mine who I've been friends with, Aixa, for over a decade. I've talked about this before, where it's a marker when you hear about someone who doesn't really have that many friends from long ago and they're all kind of new friends. It's a bit of a red flag sometimes. Maybe not. Maybe there are some anomalies in there, but I think generally speaking, it just says so much about relation.
Well, some of your friends may change. You can't act like you did when you're 8 years old your whole life, but there are some friends that have taken certain paths or might have resentment
Hmm.
or just might see things differently. It's interesting and it's okay, but there's a lot of people that will make the call instead of wait for the call.
Yeah.
And if the call is made, it's not like you're keeping score and it's a tit for tat. That's some people just, it might not be their way, but you could still pick up where you left off. You're that person. You're the ones that
Yeah.
were making things happen. And so friendships take work. You have to remember things about them. You don't have to do birthdays and anniversaries, but just remember them. And
Yeah.
that's more than enough.
I know it is. And it is. And it is it's so rare just to have good people that you can pick up the phone whenever and call. And life is unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen, which brings me to something that you've mentioned a couple of times now is your spirituality, which
Yes.
if it's okay, I want to ask you about this because one question that I wanted to ask you when I was prepping for this was just about mindset and the mindset of an entrepreneur, of a CEO, how all of that combines and how one affects the other. But you've brought up spirituality a couple of times, and I think that ties into mindset. But can you tell me just a little bit about when you talk about spirituality, what does that mean to you?
Letting go.
Mhm.
Nothing's fun when you're tense. Like I love the philosophy of Wu Wei, where there's no resistance, where you use the current, you use the wind, you use gravity. And there are certain things naturally that you're not lying, cheating, or stealing, but can be used to your advantage. I'm allowed to
Mhm.
use the sun to make me warm and to swim to cool me off.
Mhm.
And these are things that are natural. And so I believe in sixth sense and I believe in lucid dreaming and I believe in signs, especially numbers.
Okay.
And I'm not saying I believe in the matrix, but it'd be very difficult for someone to explain this beautiful, crazy world that we and how prior to my birth, what's going on. And so as I see this as a beautiful dance and as a gift, spirituality as well, I have to keep my circle secure.
Mhm.
And I am willing to extend with family and friends, financial or emotional resource. But if that light goes out, that's a very dangerous thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's tough to get that back on or you forget how to turn it on. And I love when things have runs and streaks because obviously something is happening with the trajectory. And collectively, I know I mentioned groups and people in your lives, but in essence, dearest, do know that this is a solo trip here and we do
Mm.
things in our own individual forced marches. We might have people cheering us along and giving us food and shelter and wishing us Godspeed. But there are times when you look in the mirror, put your head on a pillow, or you have those moments and you have to decide what you want to. And so for me, a lot of it is just base and core. I like routine. So
Mhm.
physiologically, if I can get up early and be well rested and work out, eat well, and do these sort of things where at least I'm loving myself and giving myself that sort of growth
Respect.
and respect, then maybe my temple, if I'm feeling bad that day, but I'm fighting to feel good with every way that I can to get that fire going, maybe through another dimension, another angle, another something, it will happen again.
Mhm.
And every time I feel sad, it's a third person. It's an outside influence. It's never internal. I'm never angry at myself. I may be disappointed. But usually the times that are the hardest is from an outside influence. It's a rain on my parade. It's a cloud on my sunny day.
Mhm.
And so I realize there are things, Courtney, that are way outside of my control. And so dance in the rain, Lieutenant Dan Forrest Gump it on the ship. Put your arms out, take it,
Yeah.
embrace it. Eminem 8 Mile it, own it.
Yeah.
Because if you do, then there's nothing else against it. You're not afraid of the dark anymore. There's no boogeyman.
Mhm.
There's nothing better than confronting the greatest fear. And these aren't physical fears. The worst fear is the mental fear. And
Yeah.
what? So people are going to laugh at you in class or you walk the hallways in your underwear or you're going to get fired or really? It's
What's
the
the
worst
worst
thing
that
that's
can
going to
happen?
happen. Yeah, really. I'd love for that to happen to me. And then I could call Courtney and tell her a great story. But learn to laugh at yourself, learn to compliment others, learn to smile, learn to look at people's names at Subway and say, "Hey, Maria, how you doing today?" And don't be surprised if you don't get extra pickles.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I've learned to live life that way. You said I have great energy, and I thank you, my friend. It's because I love life, and I love sharing the fact with people that you could have it too, if that's
Yeah.
what you want. But you sometimes have to break free.
Yeah.
It's not easy for everyone.
Said, oh my gosh, that's such a mic drop moment. Okay, so, oh my God, where do I even go from there? Well, I want to, first of all, ask what's next for Blink and your call center and just your life. What's going on? What's next?
Well, the call center industry is changing. Since
Okay.
I don't need to look for additional space, I can do more work from home and keep a core group here. And it's still fun for me. It hasn't lost its excitement, but it has changed. But I do want to write children's books. I want to do Airbnb all throughout the world so I can live in a small town and buy from local supermarkets and cook food. I'm athletic, so, I'm going to be playing some golf, tennis, and working out, and I love playing with clay, and I'm going to be taking painting classes, and I'm just going to feel like I want camp again, right? I want to be 1985 again. I might as well give me football.
I just picked my daughter up from summer camp, and this is what it sounded like.
All day, right? I'm going to send you letters with puffy stickers. That's what I want to do, Courtney.
You should. Oh my gosh, please do. You mentioned tennis. It's so I'm athletic too. I'm a yoga teacher and I run and and it's funny. So I had heard from, I think I was listening to the Jay Shetty podcast and he had Tom Holland on, the guy that plays Spider-Man. Great actor, sounds like even better guy. And he ended up talking about this tennis documentary series on Netflix. And I was like, oh, I love a good sports documentary. Oh my God, I love them. So I told my husband, Paul, I was like, I don't know, I want to watch this. I've heard racket sports are amazing for your brain and for aging and all of that. So, and that's the extent of what I know about that. But anyway, so we watch it.
Definitely
you have to watch it.
Pickleball, because a lot of people.
I know everybody's talking about pickleball. It's huge. Yeah. Everyone's talking about pickleball, but this is about tennis and you have to watch it. If you're like even remotely into tennis, which I wasn't, I knew nothing about tennis except blocked memories from gym class where I was actually horrible at it. But it's called Breakpoint and it's on Netflix and you've got to watch it. It goes through, it is so good. It's just so good. So I don't know, maybe that'll help motivate your tennis game a little bit.
I love John McEnroe. Do you remember him back in the day?
I do not because of tennis, because that was maybe a little bit before me, but he was a guest star on 30 Rock, the show 30 Rock, which was it still is one of my favorite shows ever. And he does this amazing, he's not recurring, but he's randomly in it. And it's so funny because I remember I was like, that guy is hilarious. What is he? I was like, I feel like he's a tennis player. I remember looking him up and he's a big deal tennis player. And he's mentioned in this documentary briefly.
Prime in his time, but he used to curse and throw his racket. But here's the skinny Denny could also back it up.
Right,
was the best part about it. Yeah.
Oh, man. But this document, it's so cool. They follow them throughout all the Grand Slams and Nadal and all of the mindset. It's so good. Just watch it. Okay, Richard, thank you so much. 2 more questions. I usually do 5, but I don't want to keep you too long. Okay, you asked me what my favorite ice cream is. What is your favorite ice cream?
I love chocolate.
Okay.
And I love, as they say, chocolate jimmies on top, but I'll take it in a waffle cone.
Ooh,
and it's got to have a lot of whipped cream on top as well. I'll do whipped cream on the bottom, the first scoop, whipped cream in the middle, then the second scoop, whipped cream on top, and then the Jimmy.
The Jimmy. It's a very... Jimmy's is so politically incorrect, and they should be... I'm just making a statement. I don't stand behind the Jimmy name anymore. I now that I know what it's from, Jim Crow laws. Did you know that?
I had absolutely no idea.
I didn't either. And
then why can they say Rainbow Jimmy?
I guess, I don't know. That's pride. That's
embracing it. I do apologize if I had offended somebody.
No. I'm just saying because I didn't either until recently because I'm from Boston and that's what we called it. And when I moved, I think down here, I live in Florida. I went to school in Pennsylvania and I moved to New York and then Florida. And it wasn't until then that someone was like, Jimmy's. And I was like, yeah. And we looked it up. I was like, yeah, see, they're called Jimmy's. And we went on this rabbit hole about them. And I was like, that is the weirdest connection ever. But I was just up in New Hampshire and they are still called Jimmy's there. So Maybe
Absolutely.
I'm wrong. Maybe what I read was wrong. I hope so. But all right, cool. So chocolate,
Yeah,
love a
chocolate
classic.
chocolate. Yeah. Uh,
Chocolate. Okay.
but it's whipped cream, though, at least half the bottle.
That's like my dad. My dad loves whipped cream. It's so fun.
Does he do it? Yeah, I know what he does.
Yeah. He loves hot fudge. Like my first job was at like a little ice cream stand with a farm, and they made it there, and
Oh, yeah.
it was like so good. Yeah. My second and last question for this little rapid fire is, what is your morning routine, or what is your better question? What is a self practice that you have in your daily routine?
The fun stuff and the boring stuff. The boring stuff is the gym and the protein powder shake in the morning. The fun stuff is driving to work in my convertible, listening to In Excess. I got to do that every day.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it.
That has to be done, or it's going to be a
I love
terrible
it.
day.
Yeah, you got to set the tone, right? Richard, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Resume the podcast. And thank you so much. And everyone, go check out Richard. We'll include anything in the show notes on how to get in touch with him and all of his stuff. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I'm so grateful for your precious time and energy. And if anything resonated with you, please feel free to share with a friend and subscribe. If you're interested in career coaching, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Courtney@resume-careers.com and follow me on Instagram at Courtney Austin Page. Thank you so much, and see you next week.